So a very good evening to all of you. And I would like to warmly welcome all of you on behalf of the Sri Lanka Association for the Advancement of Science, Section A, to the webinar titled Introduction to Qualitative Research, a Primer on Core Approaches. And we have with us today a very eminent personality on qualitative research to share with you, I think, one of the experts in qualitative research, Dr. Supun WIjesinghe. Dr. Supun WIjesinghe is a consultant community physician. He is the head of Family Health, Nutrition, and Behavior Research Unit of the Health Promotion Bureau. He's also the principal investigator of the Oxford University Parent Text Qualitative Research Initiative and the co-qualitative investigator of the Imperial College London Happy Village Plus project. He also has multiple collaborations with the National University of Singapore and the Griffith University with relation to nutrition behavior research. So I would like to warmly welcome Dr. WIjesinghe. Thank you so very much, Dr. WIjesinghe. On behalf of SLAS Section A, you are a very busy person, and thank you so much for spending your time to give our audience an expert view on how to do qualitative research. Just on one thing, I would like to remind our participants, this is a 40-minute link. So please, once the link ends, please rejoin using the same link. Rejoin using the same link. Thank you very much. And Dr. WIjesinghe, over to you.
Thank you, Dushanti. I hope all of you can hear me. First of all, I would like to thank Sri Lanka Association for Advancement of Science Section A for giving this opportunity to present about qualitative research. So I'll try to cover as much as possible regarding qualitative research, the primer on core approaches, as well as a little bit about analysis. If it helps, I think most of you will find it quite useful. So basically, we are going to discuss about the principles, the introduction to what sort of technique is qualitative research, and then we are going to discuss about the importance in our academic as well as professional fields and how important it is for us, not only for medicine but also for other fields as well. Primarily, I'm going to focus on approaches in qualitative research, and most of you have heard some of you might have idea about these approaches, but we are going to discuss in detail what sort of approaches and what are the methods of data collection for qualitative research. So that would be important to most of you because you will be doing, most of you will be doing research. So qualitative research data collection method would be quite useful to you. And finally, we are going to discuss something about quality and credibility. Like quantitative research, we have validity and reliability. Similarly, we have quality and credibility, something similar in qualitative field. So we are going to discuss about that. And lastly, ethical considerations. As a qualitative researcher, what sort of ethical considerations that you have to see. So if you look at qualitative research, it actually, looking at the aspect of insights into human behaviors, motivations, and sort of cultural phenomena. For example, why people consume certain food, so why people do breastfeeding, why people give exclusive breastfeeding for 6 months, or why people do come to hospitals for certain illnesses and how they perceive illnesses like cardiovascular disease and non-communicable diseases. So it's actually, unlike quantitative research, it's why and how people make decisions. And, in quantitative research, you just talk about what, when, and where it has happened. But here we are focusing on sort of exploratory path, why things are happening like that. So it's a very big pillar in academic as well as professional fields, and it's sort of a lens that to understand the way how things happen. So basically, like I have mentioned, it's an exploratory sort of a research methodology. So we are looking into the aspect of people's lives, patients' lives, patients' behaviors, and how patients behave in a setting or hospital or at home. So that's what qualitative research is all about. So unlike quantitative research, we actually dives deep into interpretation of social phenomena. So it has started from the sociology as well as anthropology, that sort of a field. But then later on, I think people found it quite useful for medicine as well as in other many other fields. So we are going to discuss about meanings, concept, definitions, characteristics, and metaphors and symbols in qualitative research rather than just count measures, numbers, zeros and ones in quantitative research. The methods are pretty obvious for most of us. They are interviews, and we have some sort of a group focus group discussions and observations. And there are many other techniques that we use to gather data or collect data regarding people's attitudes, behaviors, value systems, and concerns, especially things like motivations and all these cultural and lifestyle habits of people. So it's quite useful for many academic fields. If you look at medicine, I think it's a very vastly published area in medical field. And if you look at sociology, highly published. Most of the top-notch journals accept articles regarding qualitative research. So, and in psychology as well, for most of us, it's quite useful to understand human behaviors and how humans function or patients function. And the other fields like business also, uh, to understand customers, people do qualitative research. So it's a vast field. So why is it different from quantitative research? Now, if you look at qualitative research, primary difference would be the data type. Now, if you look at quantitative research, what we are talking about numbers, how many people had myocardial infarctions, how many people had diarrheal diseases, how many people came or admitted to the hospital with bronchial asthma, how many people diagnosed with dengue. So it's numbers we are talking about. But qualitative research, we are talking about descriptions, narrations about people's perception of the hospital, whether they are happy about their birth experience. If you're talking about patient-centered maternity care, people's mothers' perceptions about how they felt how they when they are going through the cycle of birth, antenatal care in delivery and postnatal care. So that sort of a textual and all these narrative sort of data is what we are talking about. So the data type is primarily different from quantitative research. The other difference is basically the purpose. So we usually in qualitative research seek to explore a phenomena. Why is it happening like that? While if you look at quantitative research, it's trying to quantify the problem, number of people with measles, etc. So it's just quantifying. Here we are trying to dive deep into the phenomena and trying to find out why it is occurring like that. Especially in hypothesis generation, it's quite important. And some of you might be involved in developing questionnaires or what you call tools. So instruments or tool development, qualitative data collection methods are quite useful. Now, if you look at the aspect of the process, qualitative research is more adaptable and flexible, unlike randomized controlled trials where you have rigid, structured, sort of approach where you can't much change from the protocols. I'm not saying that qualitative research does not follow protocols, but if you look at it, it's flexible. So there is a certain degree of flexibility comparing with cross-sectional and various sort of other study designs. So these are the differences from quantitative research. So if you look at the purpose of qualitative research, so there are multiple purposes. I have just briefly discussed about three important areas. So exploring a complex phenomena is one of the purposes of qualitative research. Complex phenomena like a person who has undergone CABG or coronary artery bypass grafting or some sort of a illness in per se. So its ability to understand how the patient role, how the patient perceive the doctors, what sort of a sort of reality surrounding him when he was admitted to the hospital, what sort of a experience he received. So that sort of exploring, sort of phenomena, were quite important phenomena are the ones that we are focusing on qualitative research. Things like vaccine perceptions. Now, we had a recent incident of measles vaccine hesitancy in certain MOH area, medical officer of health area. So, why people not bringing their children for measles vaccination, etc. So, this sort of a complex phenomena can be studied through qualitative research, as well as cultural dynamics, societal changes. All these things uh, cannot be just captured by numeric data alone. So qualitative research is quite useful in complex phenomena, studying complex phenomena. The other most important aspect of qualitative research is understanding human behaviors, why people behave the way they behave in a certain instances, certain phenomena, certain illnesses. Like for example, it's quite important how if you study a patient when they get a certain disease, the way they behave or illness behaviors are quite important thing that we can study using qualitative research. So it's people's experience from their perspective. Usually, you can't capture this sort of a thing in quantitative research. The personal stories of people, personal experiences, how people interpret their surroundings. For example, if how they the general practitioner, how they interpret the hospital, how they perception. So these things can be studied through qualitative research. The other most important thing, which is practically useful for you, is generating a hypothesis. When you are doing a certain a PhD or any other degree, you might have a hypothesis, underlying hypothesis. So you want to generate this hypothesis, test this hypothesis using sort of a quantitative. So prior to that, you need to generate certain data regarding how and why, sort of theories behind it. So testing hypothesis is uh, more likely towards quantitative research, but generating a hypothesis is more towards qualitative arena. So collection of data and trying to develop a hypothesis is an area that we usually focus in qualitative research. So it's quite important for most of our research that if you are generating a new hypothesis, that you follow the aspects of qualitative research and get the data as much as possible prior to going into quantitative research. So that is the third important thing. Now, if you look at qualitative research, key features of qualitative research include these three areas: subjectivity, naturalistic inquiry, and inductive reasoning. Now, most of the quantitative research is objective. I mean, it does not depend on the researcher. Now, if I'm doing a quantitative research on patients with measles, I mean, my view of how I believe patient gets the measles is not important if you are talking about quantitative. But if you are talking qualitative research, why do they get this? If you are talking HIV/AIDS, why do these people get it? My viewpoint is quite important. So this is the researcher's perspective. So there's a subjectivity there. Uh, Quantitative research is more objective, but qualitative has a subjective aspect to it, and it try to study people in their natural environment. Most of the qualitative research we do used to study people in their natural environment. So the natural settings are quite important. For example, if you're looking at the quality of uh, the care received at a hospital from a mother to a child, or so this is one of the features that we see over and over in qualitative research. The last one is inductive reasoning. Actually, sometimes it can be deductive, but usually it's inductive. Inductive in the sense that researcher develops a theory through looking at the data. You don't have a sort of a preconceived idea. Just usually this inductive reasoning is something quite useful in qualitative research, where you let the data come up with a theory. So you analyze the data and you develop a theory. This is called bottom-up approach in some textbooks or some literature. But this is one of the areas that qualitative research is strong. So we'll move into the approaches of qualitative research. Now, if you look at the approaches, qualitative research mostly talks about three approaches. So if you look at approaches, we have narrative research, we have phenomenological research, and then grounded theory-based research, ethnography, and case study research. So these are the major areas. There are many classifications for approaches of qualitative research, but I have just listed out the most important areas. So if you look at, doing a PhD, if you're looking at from the perspective of your research area, most of your research will fall into this grounded theory, case studies, and narrative form of research. But other areas, I think I'm looking at the medical field, can have a very vast, presence. If you look at sociological, phenomenological research is some one of the areas they do a lot of, sociology and anthropological research, and ethnography is also something similar. We'll just have a brief look at what each approach means. So if you look at narrative research, this actually focus on stories of individuals, personal experience of patients, how they interpret their lives, how they interpret in the world around them. So it's the narrations, storytelling type of things. So these are important. If you look at a medical student, how he has gone through his career and how he has become a doctor, and now how he feels towards the patient. So this is a form of a medical education, sort of a approach to it, but it's a qualitative approach. We call narrative research. So it's a personal experience. That's one of the key. And there's a chronology with starting and end, beginning and end. So when the patient gets a disease, how he felt, and after he was cured, how he felt, that sort of a thing. And you can have various areas of application for this: education, medicine, psychology, sociology, etc. Now, this is an example of a narrative research. Now, this is exploring perception and usage of narrative medicine by physician specialty. This is a qualitative analysis, widely cited one. So they have actually done something called narrative medicine from the physician's perspective, how they feel for certain specialties, how narration can help. So this is one of the research related to narratives or storytelling sort of an approach. So if you're interested, you can go to this paper. It's a uh, um, sort of a paper, and just and then we look at the second type of qualitative research. Phenomenological aims to understand or try to understand a phenomena. For example, if you take quality of delivery received at the labor room, so that sort of a phenomena, their birth experience or illness experience of a patient who has undergone a stroke. So that sort of a thing. So they actually, study the personal experience as well as the phenomena surrounding them. So again, we have certain things or terminology we use called the lived experience, how patient live with the phenomenon. And then there are things like bracketing, how we feel, the researcher's understanding of it, not the patient's. So we have these certain things. And of course, the application areas are vast, from healthcare, psychology, education, etc. So this is also something that people use when they study a certain phenomenon. Now, for example, this is a phenomenological research, again done, a study done on doctors' first year of clinical practice, how they feel their experience the first year of clinical practice. So this is again experience, sort of a sharing of a certain phenomena. So this is again interesting study. If you are interested, DOI is there, so you can read and go through how they have studied this phenomenological uh, study of doctors first year. Then most of us use grounded theory. This is where we use, because most of our research involve in-depth interviews, focus group discussions based on qualitative data. So the grounded theory is the vastly used thing in tool development, medical literature, evidence-based medicine, so many things. So you use this technique, so this approach. So it's actually a systematic methodology of constructing theories, so gathering our analysis of data, and it's especially inductive. What I mean by inductive is the data generate the theory, not the other way around. We have a theory and we try to prove the theory. That is called the deductive technique. We will discuss a little bit about inductive and deductive methods of analysis later. But we grounded theory usually is inductive. So it is actually the data that generates, from the data that we have, we are generating a theory. So we collect data, gather data, and coding is done, and then analyzing, and then we come up with certain theories. Again, from healthcare to social sciences and businesses, we use this. One of the important things of grounded theory, we constantly cross-check whether our data is correct. So data is continuously compared with new data that is being generated. So this is the technique that most of us use, because we are not using pure phenomenological research unless your study or your PhD or your MD or whatever is based on that. We don't use ethnography and phenomenology, but most of us use part of qualitative data collection, which is based on grounded theory. So this is where most of us use qualitative research in our fields or academic professions. So this is a example which I have given here. Again, a grounded theory study exploring healthcare professionals' decision making when managing end-stage heart failure cases. So here we have actually what we have done here is asking from the patients, the doctors, so the healthcare professionals, how they make decisions managing end-stage heart failure cases. So this is again based on grounded theory. The last, or one before the last, is ethnography. Now, ethnography involves culture, study of culture, and certain systematic study of people and culture and how they behave, like ethnic groups. You can study estate sector, the how they feed their children, how their healthy behaviors are there, how their vaccine behaviors, anti-vaccine vaxxers, and all these things. You study these cultures, how people come for contact screening if you're talking about COVID and all the other things. If you're talking about leprosy, that sort of diseases, contagious diseases like tuberculosis and other things. So you study how people, in a certain cultural setup, how people behave. And usually, ethnography, we go to the field as researchers and observe and probably mingle with the people and try to find them. One of the key studies which came to recent past is study of beggars, which is not a medical field of study, but how they behave. So you can go, this is a purely observation based and participatory approach, but participant observation is very important in ethnographic studies. So anthropology is one of the areas, as well as sociology is one of the areas we can use ethnography, especially urban studies, how urban spaces affect people, how urbanization affects people. So these sort of a thing are the modern sort of ethnographic methods that we actually use for qualitative research. So again, this is an example from the field of medicine. So ethnographic research as an evolving method for supportive healthcare improvement skills. Now, this is scoping review. Uh, we are talking about quality of hospital care. So this is where they have studied hospitals. So again, it's available in this DOI, so you can go through it if you are interested. So this is scoping review. So what is interested about this, because they are studying ethnographic research as an evolving method for healthcare improvement in hospitals as well as other. Now the last one is case study research. Again, this is something that we do. Now this is different from case studies where you see clinical cases. One case you are describing, so that is a different uh, terminology we are using, and case series approach. This is different. This is case study of in-depth contextual analysis of a single event or an individual. For example, you can analyze what has happened over the past 10 years in the hospital, how the hospital quality has improved, that sort of approach. So it's a case study. So this is a single setting based thing. Probably some people use the case series and this case study synonymously, but this is different. So again, this has the context is important, similar to ethnography. Where you are doing it is important. If it is a single institution, organization, so you can study the whole organization or a process in that way. Again, it's applicable to business, education, psychology, etc. So this is no, something we have actually published I think, few 1 year ago. So this is strengthening social capital, how nutrition uh, was improved through community engagement in the mother support groups or communities, uh, how it has improved. So this is a case study we have done, how communities faced nutrition challenges and they improved nutrition of their children through the social capital concept called social capital in our community. So it's an interesting paper, one of the few that has been published in Sri Lanka. So if you are interested, you can go through it. So this is using the case study approach. So you have detailed description of how we have used the case study approach. Right. So if that brings us to the end of the approaches. So if you're interested in doing qualitative research, you have to plan qualitative research, how to do it. So you have to choose the research question first, and then you have
Yeah.
to do a qualitative research, the things that you have to consider. So number one is choosing a research question, and number two, your literature review, and then ethical considerations, and then sampling, which is
சரி.
quite
அவரு
important.
வாங்க வேற இப்பானு 4 மாசம் தானே வந்து.
And then you have to discuss about data collection planning. So these are the areas, if you are interested in doing qualitative research for anything, that you have to think of. First one, choosing a research question. Now, first of all, you have to narrow down what you are trying to do. For example, if you are trying to develop a tool, develop an instrument for depression assessment, or you are trying to develop an instrument for quality of life assessment, you are trying to develop a tool for perception of certain things, you are trying to develop a tool for knowledge attitude practice assessment. So you have to focus on the area. So you narrow down what you really want to do, what sort of a relevance is there, and you look at the feasibility, whether want to do the in-depth interviews, you have to do the focus group discussions. So what sort of feasibility things, and whether it's focus the area. So you have to think about these areas first. I have just mentioned about tool development, but if you look at other things like natural disasters, how people perceive healthcare, how people perceive doctors striking, how people perceive about medical education, all these things. So you have to narrow down and have a very good research question. Then you have to do a thorough literature review. Especially if you are doing qualitative research, you are generating a hypothesis. So hypothesis generation involves reading a lot of literature, because prior to doing your in-depth interviews, which is probably you are talking about Sri Lankan hospital setup, which is how quality can be improved in Sri Lankan hospital setup, you have to read all about Sri Lankan hospital setup and the present status of the hospital setup, that sort of a thing. So you have to do a comprehensive sort of a literature review. Once you do that, you have to find out the research gaps. So you have to do a critical analysis of the literature that you have found, and then synthesize and then strategize how you can further develop your hypothesis, further develop your theory. So extensive literature review is mandatory for qualitative research. We're going to talk at the end about ethical consideration. Of course, people think that qualitative research does not need ethical approvals. It needs ethical approvals as much as quantitative research. So we talk about informed consent, confidentiality, and non-maleficence and other ethical considerations. All the qualitative research you are doing should have a ethics approval. So it's paramount in qualitative research that you have informed consent from the patients. If you're talking about mothers, even if they are, in the hospitals undergoing free healthcare in a Sri Lankan setup, still you need consent, informed consent and ethics approval. So people think just because you are interviewing them, and since it's not quantitative, and since they are your patients, you don't need ethical clearance or ethical approval. But you do need ethical approval for all the human research involving humans. So it's very important. Qualitative research also you need informed consent, confidentiality, and various other safeguarding of people's privacy and confidentiality. Now, this is the most important and area that most people are having doubts. Now, if you look at sampling methods, what sort of a sample do we need for qualitative research? So most of the time, qualitative research are different from quantitative research sampling. So commonest method is called purposive sampling. Purposive in the sense it depends on what you are studying. If you are studying about cardiovascular diseases, all the patients you select in the ward with cardiovascular disease can be considered as your sample. So it's non-random, purposive. You select people according to your area of need. For example, we have two types of purposive sampling in qualitative research. One is called heterogeneous and another one is homogeneous. Now, homogeneous sampling, you are taking similar people. You want to study as much as possible about a certain event, uh, bronchial asthma, how people suffer from bronchial asthma. So you select all the bronchial asthma cases. And then you have something called heterogeneous purposive sampling. You select different sort of type of people. People with severe bronchial asthma and people with mild bronchial asthma. So you have a mix of people. It depends on your research what you are going to do, but you can justify both type of purposive sampling in qualitative. You don't need to have a simple random or systematic sort of sampling. So if you're taking patients, you can select based on your results, the question in you are going to study. And if you're looking at sensitive issues, there's a technique called snowball sampling. If you are talking about, culture, sexual preferences, on all these, STD, HIV, AIDS related things, homosexuality, and all these other aspects. These are sensitive issues that people talk. So snowball sampling is a one method. You ask from one person, how many people can you bring to me? And then you ask each people that he or she brings, and how many more people can you. So this is like a sort of a cascading sort of a sampling frame. So this is how you study a complex and sensitive phenomenon. Then the last type is theoretical sampling. So you based on your theory, you study how people feel about antenatal care delivery in a MOH office or medical officer of health office. So you ask from the MOHs, AMOHs, PHNSs, various categories, PHIs, and then PHMs, and then finally the patients. So this is called theoretical. Based on your theory, you feel that different people feel different way. So that is why you have a theory. You have a theory that different people in different categories feel differently. So you have a theoretical basis for that. So based on theory, you select participants. Again, acceptable method in uh, qualitative uh, research. So these are the three major ways we sample in qualitative. Most of our sample in, I mean, 90% is purposive. So sometimes snowballing we use, and theoretical sampling, of course, if you are developing new tools for your research, you can go with the theoretical sampling. So once you select that, you have to think of how we are going to collect data. So data collection method, we'll briefly discuss little later. So you have to select a data collection method, in-depth interviews, focus group discussions, or whether they are observations. And then based on that, you have to come up with a interview guide or focus group guide or some sort of guide for the data collection. And then finally, the data logistics. It's very difficult. Unlike quantitative research, you need a lot of logistic arrangement for qualitative research. If you're talking about focus group discussions, it is a big undertaking because you had to organize a space, you had to get hold of all the people, you had to bring them down, you had to have a moderator, you have to have a person who's conducting the interviews. So all these things are quite important. So logistics is a nightmare if you consider uh, qualitative research compared to quantitative. And then ethical concerns, we discuss about this, quality assurance, and all these areas you have to focus on. Now we discussed earlier about data collection methods. Now it's a cornerstone of qualitative research. Unlike quantitative research, we have so many ways of collecting data because we are studying human behaviors, human experiences, and social phenomena. And we have a wide variety of data collection methods available. Now, if you look at the methods, how to select a one depends on your research objective and sensitivity, context sensitivity, what sort of a thing you are studying, and how depth of insight you need. Whether you want deeply go into details, that's one way, or whether you want to, sort of have a light, sort of a very short or narrow, fast, quick insight, that is different. So based on that, you have variety of data collection methods. Most of us use two types, that's in-depth interviews and focus group. Now, in-depth interviews are the most commonest ones. Now, you have various types of in-depth interviews, which we will discuss. The basic ones are like lasting for 1 hour and 2 hours. Then, people have semi sort of a structured interviews where you have, sort of a qualitative as well as quantitative mix. But here in qualitative research, if you talk about in-depth interviews, it really means one-on-one, long conversations, and it is not structured as quantitative research. Then you have focus group discussions, group discussions, and other three methods are observations. Of course, we have participatory and non-participatory observations. So this is also used in certain areas. Like for example, if you want to observe how people give EPI vaccine for children, you can do participatory or non-participatory observation. Then you have other two method, document analysis, very important, not much used in Sri Lanka and in Sri Lanka research, but it's quite useful for many areas, but it's not that useful. And then visual method, rarely used again. We don't use visual methods, but most of the other developing countries, they use visual method, study human interactions and patient doctor sort of a relationship studying, and all these things can be done through visual measure method. So these are data collection methods for qualitative research. Most of us do in-depth interviews or focus group discussions. So that is where most of our research is focused on. Now, if you look at data collection methods, the golden rule is using multiple methods enhance the credibility and depth of finding. So rather than using 2 or 3 in-depth interviews, if you couple it with focus group discussion, couple it with document analysis, couple it with visual or observation method, it enrich data. So that is why we always ask people to use multiple methods. What we call, the concept is called the triangulation. Triangulation is that you are all the methods, all the data points into same direction. So it's very easy to develop a theory or hypothesis based on that. Of course, practicality is important. Not easy to conduct a focus group discussion. Very difficult. I mean, we have done it. Extremely difficult. We have done so many focus group. We know how difficult it is to conduct focus group discussions. So we'll start with focus group discussion. I'll try to briefly highlight because we don't have much time. So most of you know what is focus group discussion. So it's a group of 6 to 8 people, probably some people say 6 to 10, but the lesser the better. So the thing is, you open communicate, okay, sort of open communication and interaction among the participants. Moderated, always it has to be moderated. So there are no qualitative research. I mean, you can't consider it as a qualitative research data collection method if you don't have a moderator. It's not considered as a focus group unless you have moderator. So there should be a skilled moderator who guides the discussion, keeps it in the topic, and ensure everybody participates. So this is a very good, sort of a method if you are studying, sort of explore complex behaviors, generate new ideas and hypotheses, right? And group dynamic is important. For example, if you are conducting about why people don't bring their children to for measles vaccination, even despite they feel that their children could get infection. So in that case, you can gather 6 to 8 people, mothers who have not vaccinated, and you can conduct a focus group discussion. Here, the group dynamics are quite important. Some people might object to certain ideas. So it's a, sort of in a natural way that you can understand, people's complex behaviors. So that is the importance. And it's quite cost effective, considering in-depth interviews, because you can have one day and complete the focus group discussion. So if you are looking for a diversity of opinion, focus group discussion is the way to go. Concept testing, yes, this is useful. Cultural and community insight, patient insights, this is quite useful regarding exploring norms, values, attitudes of a certain thing. Planning is very important in a focus group discussion. You have to define what you really want to do, and then you have to select the participants who are going. Whether it's a sort of a purposive sample of homogeneous participants, or a purposive sample of heterogeneous participants, people who are differ from various things, or whether they are same type of people. Most importantly, you should have a discussion guide. So you should always follow the guide. You might have to train your sort of a moderators as well as the note takers, but always stick to the discussion guide, so there is a consistency among the interviews. And then choose a venue, logistics, and arrange it. Usually one interview lasts about 1 hour, preferably, because people, if you go beyond 1 hour, people tend to sort of irritate others, and then you won't get that much of rich data after 2 hours, mostly 2 hours, but beyond 2 hours they are not keeping their attention into what you really want to do. So again, venue is important. It should be a venue without disturbance. So you should have at least two people. One is the moderator, a neutral person who conducts the interview, a skilled in managing group dynamics, should have idea about the your focus group discussion guide, and it should he or she should drive the discussion. So how to do? You have a warm up, sort of ice breaking session. Then you facilitate the discussion, bring out the questions that you want the answers. What do you feel about contraceptive usage in these people? What do you feel about quality of hospital delivery services, etc.? And then you encourage participation of all the people. Mindful about people who dominate, because you have to let all the people talk, and at the end you summarize the points. So this is the moderator's role. So there is somebody who takes notes. That's the second person. uh, Probably with a recorder, you record the whole interview. It should be a high quality recorder. I mean, it's difficult. You can do it in the phone. Most of the modern phones, you have the record apps. But if you don't have the high grade quality phone, you have background noises. Very difficult when you have background noises. But most of the the quality recorders, you have noise cancellation, so you only get the vocal topic, how people talk. That's the only thing. So your AC noises, fan noises, all the other background humming noises, all these things go away if you have a high quality recorder. So it's worth investing on a high quality recorder if you really want to do focus group discussions. You can do it in your phone, but you will find it very difficult when you are playing it back in if you don't have noise cancellation. So noise cancellation is quite important practically if you are conducting focus group discussions, because it's a large group. So second one, in-depth interviews. So this is pretty obvious, and these are fundamental detailed information collection from one-on-one individual experience of people, and you ask from participants about their own perspective of how they feel, right? So this is very flexible method, and it is very sort of a method you can get sensitive data from patients as well as people. So this is the method to use if you're really talking about sensitive information. Personal and confidential interviews. So it's a private setting, so people open up, and it's flexible. You can arrange a time, and you can sit with them, and they, when you build up their trust, they open up and tell everything. Especially if you are looking at perspective of quality of care of hospitals, quality of care of wards, quality of care you receive from doctors, ward staff, nurses, and all that. In-depth into interviews are the way to go, because if you have focus group discussion, nobody will come up with bad comments. This is the norm. But if you have in-depth interviews and you have a neutral or sort of a person who's balanced, you get a very rich data. We have done sort of patient-centered maternity care. There are certain research, and a lot of insights were gained through this method. So in-depth interviews are suited for exploring new areas of research, understand complex phenomena, gain a detailed insight into individual experience. So they are very powerful tools for hypothesis generation and how people experience certain things in their life. So depth is more than focus group discussions, and this flexible, there's a personal connection, so people open up and you can come up with a tailored approach. Of course, you should have an in-depth interview guide. Similar to focus group discussion guide, you should have an in-depth interview guide. It generates rich and detailed data. So again, we have discussed about this, when to use this, sensitive areas, complex processes, gathering detailed life histories, developing new theories. So most of your tool development processes should have in-depth interviews. One, sort of a breakaway from in-depth interviews called key informant, who are people who are patients, but they are aware about other people. For example, if I talk about antenatal care, the mother interview is in-depth interview. But if you are taking data from the midwife, that is a key informant. So the technique, the in-depth, the interview technique is same, but you call that person is a key informant. So that's a subtle difference between the two. But the technique of the interviews is more or less similar. So again, similar to focus group discussion, you plan the participants, setting the stage. Again, transcribing, recording is very important. You should have a good quality recorder. Mind you, you can use your phones, but you should have noise cancellation. But here it's much lesser. You can use your mobile phones to record it because it's one-to-one, so it's easy to listen and your mobile phones capture all this data. Again, if you are developing a guide, you should have introductory questions, key questions, and if they don't understand it, you should have probing questions. You don't come up with the probing questions first. You should have key questions. What do you understand by literacy related to non-communicable diseases? If they don't understand, what do you know about non-communicable diseases? What sort of information you need about? Though these are probing questions, but you don't ask at the first. You have the key questions. If they don't understand, only you have probing questions. Then reflective questions. You at the end you ask, how do you feel about this interview? What sort of understanding you have about non-communicable disease, like that. So these are called reflective questions. Then we have another technique which most of us do not use. These are called unobtrusive methods. Now, if you look at unobtrusive, we have something called observations, and then you have document and content analysis, right? So basically, yeah, qualitative research techniques that not that much use unless for document analysis, which minimize researchers' influence on subject of study. Now, if you talk about in-depth interviews, focus group discussions, if you are the service provider, like I'm the doctor, I'm asking whether are you happy with the delivery services or the labor undergoing labor rooms, quality of care of the labor room. People will be not come out with the correct answers because they are scared that you will think bad of them or you will scold them, that sort of a thing. But if you have unobtrusive methods, you can see the care or quality of care in a way which is more unbiased. So these are the methods that you can use to collect that sort of a data. So it has a minimum footprint. So researcher bias is minimum. And you can do a non-interactive sort of a data collection technique. You don't intervene with anything, you just observe. So that is the beauty of this technique. So then you have various types of unobtrusive research. Observations is a one type. Then you have content analysis. Like you go through all the BHTs. You go to the record room, go through the BHTs and see what sort of problems in labor rooms, what sort of problems in wards that you have observed. Historical research, you can analyze historical records from 1950s and etc. and study these things. And then commonest one we use is secondary data analysis. Data that is collected for different purposes, that sort of a thing is called. And then you do sort of a sociological study sort of a thing, like graffitis. In Sri Lanka we don't have that much, but in other countries they study the communities in this way. This is called physical trace analysis. The key advantage is cost effective and reduce researcher bias. The challenges are that you have limited control over data quality because you are not collecting primary data, you are just observing. So you are sort of collecting secondary other people collected data. And the ethical considerations, of course you need to have ethics even if you are doing unobtrusive methods. Right. One of the other areas of obtrusive method is document analysis. You can study the documents. Now, for example, some people study protocols of the hospitals, how it has changed over time from 1990s to nowadays. If you are trying the baby friendly hospital initiative, how it has changed. So these are called document analysis. Some people call this policy sort of desk reviews, etc. But we are studying the content of the documents. So this is also qualitative research. So it is called content analysis. In a way, you are analyzing text, images, media contents, etc., BHTs or any other documents. So you can use it for range of data, very fast, and of course, researcher bias is minimized. But only problem is they are secondary data. Sometimes you want to find it what you really need. So again, this sort of a document analysis you can do by identifying sources where you are going to get the data from, whether it's BHTs, whether it's patient records, whether it's from the record room, whatever, or then what sort of a thing you are going to collect. And based on that, you code the data and categorize. We don't have much time to go into qualitative data analysis, but I'll try to briefly summarize this later on. Right. So once you collect data, what to do with it? You have, hours and hours of recordings of in-depth interviews and focus group discussions and documents, texts, all these things. So there are many ways to analyze. There are two major types of analysis. We are talking about inductive and deductive, and then content analysis and thematic analysis. Now, inductive theory building is one of the ways of analyzing content, where you just develop your theories or hypothesis based on the data itself. You don't have a preconceived hypothesis. How patients behave, I think this way. I think this is number one, this is number two, this is number three. No, you just take the data and analyze it, and then you come up with a theory. This is the way patients behave. This is from the data. These people have said like this and like this and like this. That's why I'm saying this. So this is called inductive theory building. Most of the qualitative research we use inductive. So it's one of the key areas. Yeah. The other one is deductive theory building. So this is, you have a sort of a hypothesis where you sort of confirm your hypothesis using qualitative data. So I'm not. I think we have again, time is limited. So content analysis, you just analyze the contents based on what is there. So you code the data. How much people have discussed about doctors are scolding patients like that. How much do people discuss about not enough beds in the hospital? So this sort of analysis we call content analysis. Then thematic analysis. You analyze the themes derived from your qualitative data. So it's like what sort of themes people discuss. If you are talking about care from the labor room, PHM is calling the patients. So that is communication is the theme that we are talking about. Communication between the patient as well from the health staff. So we derive themes. Unlike content analysis, we just read and then try to come up with a theme. Unlike you are just putting code 1, code 2, code 3, you are just analyzing, reading, rereading, writing, and then coming. So if you look at qualitative data analysis software, my preference is first one, Liger. Now this is one of the free softwares you can use. It has a 200 MB data capacity, and online the link is given here, and you can do your basic qualitative analysis using this. And it has automatic transcription feature. You can use Sinhala. If you are interested in doing coding and analysis, you can use it. It has a Sinhala support, Sinhala Unicode and Tamil Unicode support. So those people who are interested, you can write. And it has an AI feature, automatic coding function, so many. More expensive ones are Atlas TI, NVO, MaxQD, and Microsoft Excel. Of course, the basic one. You enter your data using. Then a little bit about quality. Of course, you talk about validity and credibility. Similar to validity and reliability, we talk about quality and credibility and trustworthiness of data. So it's important, similar to validity and reliability, that we discuss about these things. Trustworthiness is something related to, sort of what you are measuring, the intended thing. Rigor is your, methodological, way that you have measured it. And then ethical integrity also you have to give. So credibility, transferability, dependability, and confirmability are the ones that you look for. Credibility is the confidence and the truth of the findings of your qualitative data. Transferability is something similar to generalizability, whether you can apply to other populations, other patient population. Dependability is the stability of data, like reliability. That is the confirmability is more or less similar to validity. Findings are shaped by participant ideas, and you can confirm it. So you can use certain techniques to ensure all these things like triangulation, debriefing, and member checking. Triangulation is what we have discussed earlier. Peer review is one thing. You ask from others, is this qualitative data make sense to you? You ask from senior, your professors and all that. Then you member check. You, at the end of the focus group discussion, you code the data, derive the themes and show it to them and ask, this is what have you talked about, or this is different. So they will say, members will say, yes, that's what we have talked about, like that. So we have various triangulations like data triangulation, methodological triangulation, and investigator theoretical triangulation. Of course, ethics is important in research, and you need informed consent. I think we have discussed about this. So informed consent is mandatory, and confidentiality is mandatory, and you need ethical approval for all your research. So I will leave with this slide. Now we have various type of study designs. You are using sometimes convergent designs. You are using quantitative data and then couple it with qualitative data simultaneously. So this is one type of research design. Then you have sequential design. You first do qualitative data and then strengthen it with quantitative data. This is called exploratory type of a design. Then you have an explanatory type where you do quantitative data and then you come up with qualitative explanations for that. This is called explore. And then you have embedded design. In the same study, you have qualitative part, quantitative part. So this is called embedded design. Then multi-phase, you have similar sort of designs, and you have sort of a big research study with alternating qualitative and component of quantitative. Right. So that's all I have to say. I hope you have gathered something from the lecture. So we have few minutes left. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you so much, Dr. WIjesinghe, for that excellent presentation. I'm very sure our participants benefited greatly. Are there any questions from the participants? We have 4 minutes left in this link. Do we have any questions from the participants? You can put the question in the chat if you like, or you can unmute and speak if you have any questions. Okay, so in the absence of any questions, I would like to thank Dr. Supun WIjesinghe, consultant community physician and head of family health, nutrition and behavior research unit of the health promotion.
Shanti, there's one question.
Sure.
Yeah, sorry. Somebody has asked, there are guidelines. Yes, we have SRQR, and we have a sort of, if you're interested, we have qualitative guidelines. I mean, it's available in the journal like Strobe and Prisma. We have qualitative. If you're writing a scientific publication, you have to stick to these guidelines. It depends on the journal you are going to submit. But yes, of course, we have CORAC or, certain type of SRQR, that sort of a guidelines are there. Sorry, over to you.
No problem. Thank you so much, Dr. Supun WIjesinghe. Thank you so much for spending your evening with us and spending the time you have to rest and do your own work. We greatly appreciate it on behalf of the Sri Lanka Association for the Advancement of Science, Section A. I have no doubt that all our participants greatly benefited from your expert knowledge. Thank you very much for being with us, and we wish you all the best in all your future qualitative endeavors. And to all our participants, thank you for joining us, and do join us in future webinars of Section A as well. Thank you and good night.
Thank you and good night. Thank you so much for letting me participate in your, this webinar. Thank you so much. One question somebody has asked: how to decide on amount of in-depth interviews? That depends on data triangulation, what we call saturation point. If you don't get, new data after 5, 6, 7 in-depth interviews, you can stop there. That you are not getting any new data. So that is what we call saturation point. You can have multiple methods to achieve saturation. Okay, thank you so much, Shanti.
Awesome.
Night.
Thank you, and good night to all. Thank you.